the most exciting stream on YouTube/Facebook. Nobody does anything more exciting than sit and sign their name hundreds of times over and over.
And moving much paper.
Yes. Ooh. Yep. We should gamify this so you see me leveling up each time I finish a stack. Then it'd be like on Twitch and things. Bing! New level reached! Welcome. In all seriousness, what I'm doing is I am signing tip-in pages for the UK version of Rhythm of War, which is the 4th book in the Stormlight archive. Because I will not be able to go on tour to the UK as planned, we are instead signing huge stacks of these things, which are going to get bound into books and are then going to be available for you at Waterstones and other fine booksellers in the UK and Ireland. I'm not sure about anywhere else, but so I am going to finish 2 stacks of these tonight, and they will be done and will be shipped across the pond to all of you lovely folks over there. We also have the stream mascot, Magellan the macaw, who is at the top of his chain right now, trying to bite it off the ceiling instead of being in frame. Is he in frame? You can see maybe his tail feathers.
I don't know if we can see his tail feathers right there, but I did adjust the chain, so I'm hoping that it's not as noisy as it has been in the past.
Yes, making things not noisy with Magellan is a full-time occupation.
Yeah, I probably just need to go get the chain cut.
The
so
one
it's
that
not an issue, because right now it's basically 2 lengths.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It might be nice to have it in case there's a toy of a different length.
Yes, of a different length. That is true.
So if it's not too noisy, I won't worry about it.
You could also make it in such a way that you tape the excess chain across the ceiling.
That's true.
And then it wouldn't.
But this doesn't seem too bad so far.
No, it doesn't. It seems like you've done a good job. Hey, Jello, we're talking about you. Sometime we need to get a mirror because he loves talking to the bird in the mirror. Different parrots respond differently to mirrors. Some of them, it's a bad idea to have a mirror because they get very aggressive. Jello loves talking to the bird in the mirror. In fact, on the way over here, I passed our hallway mirror, and he looked, and he saw the bird in the mirror and said, "Hello!" And then he said, "Dance!" And then he danced, and the bird in the mirror danced, and so Jello said, "Good bird!" So he loves giving orders to the bird in the mirror and watching the bird in the mirror do the things he's ordered him to do, and then telling him he's a good bird. And you put a mirror in front of him, he'll spend an hour talking to the bird in the mirror.
Sounds just like our friend Kathy. She's in the chat. Hello, Kathy. She said she didn't want to hear my voice, so now I have to insult her.
Yes, it's a common occurrence around the house.
Yes.
We do not have any visitors this week. For the first time in months, you get only me. Sorry, no flashy artist guests or whatnot this time around. Instead, I'm just going to be signing a whole bunch of stuff and answering your questions. So let's get to it. I looked at one of the streams, just one of the rebroadcasts or the saved ones, and noticed there are a lot of questions that you guys ask, and we get to very few of them. So.
Well, especially since most of the time when I make a post about it earlier in the day, I tell people they can leave their questions there, and that's generally where we get a lot of our questions from in advance.
And so the questions being asked in the stream are not ones we necessarily get to that often.
Yeah, well, if there's a really good question, I will answer it, and we do have a few other minions who are pulling questions from that and adding it to the list. During the last stream, we deleted literally 10 pages of questions because we had 20. So... sorry if your question was in there. There's a lot of you asking questions, but Brandon signs a lot, so...
Yes. Fortunately, I have lots of stuff I need to do, and so thank you all for keeping me company while I answer random questions on the stream and write my initials over and over and over and over and over again.
So the first one is from David. He wants to know if you've ever been to Mexico, and if not, do you plan on going in the future?
So I have only been to Mexico in the most cheatiest of ways, like across the border to a nearby tourist trap city, or off of cruise ships to equivalent tourist trap cities. I would really like to visit Mexico City just because the Arithmetist has some Aztec things going on in it, particularly in the sequel if I ever write it. And so visit, let's see, was Mexico City Teotihuacan or was it Tenochtitlan? It was one of the two. I think it was Tenochtitlan. But just going and seeing, I hear you can see all kinds of really cool things from, Aztec history and whatnot in Mexico City. And the landscape of Mexico City is also just really interesting because it used to be an island. And so, anyway, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat about some of those things, but I would like to visit that. But I haven't had a chance yet. There was a time where I was seriously researching a trip to go down because I was going to be able to work on the Arithmetist, and then I did not get to work on the Arithmetist too, which is called the Atzlanian. So if anyone knows their Aztec mythology, that should raise an eyebrow.
Syed has a related question, wondering if you'll ever come to Pakistan.
Pakistan. Will I ever come to Pakistan? I don't think it's outside reason that I would end up in Pakistan at some point. Generally, the vast majority of my trips are taken because a convention has invited me or a publisher wants me to do a tour. And basically everywhere I go, unless it's the occasional trip for fun, which usually has to be to a place that involves me writing on a beach, then it's going to involve that. So if I get invited to a convention in Pakistan, that improves the likelihood of it. One of the issues is, I don't know what book distribution is like in Pakistan, and I know for a fact we do not have a Pakistani publisher, and so that rules out the publisher bringing me in. But maybe as things move in the future, we will get more Pakistani fantasy and science fiction publishers who want to try fantasy and science fiction books, and then it will happen.
And then I can come with you, because that would be amazing. Nadia wants to know if we've kicked around the idea for publishing an illustrated version of the Stormlight Archive or some sort of guide with illustrations.
Right. We have kicked around the idea of a world guide, which is pretty common in epic fantasy. George has some... Wheel of Time had the big white book, as it was called, the guide to the Wheel of Time, and then following that, an encyclopedia. I could imagine doing world guides like that with lots of artwork and things for various Cosmere worlds. I would not want to do it for Stormlight until Book 5 is done, because then you've got kind of Book 5 will wrap up the first major arc, and it would just be a good time for something like that as a companion to the first 5 books. But we haven't talked about it really seriously ever, just because we have so many projects on our plate that this one, just not one we've gotten around to. And plus, they tend to take a ton of work, or conversely, a ton of randomness. I know the people who worked on the big white book for Wheel of Time, and they're very proud of it, and they did some very good work. But a lot of the fans were disappointed in the artwork quality for some of the pieces in the big white book, and that's always been kind of a warning cry to me, that if you are expecting artwork like we have in the end pages of the Stormlight Archive all the way through it, that's a lot of work and involves a lot of Isaac's time. And so we would have to find a time when he is excited to do it, or that we can, talk Ben McSweeney into, doing that himself or something like that. So yeah, it's on the table, but I wouldn't expect it soon.
And I didn't catch the name in the chat. Reflex Jat wants to know how you're feeling about Dawnshard.
Dawnshard is just a lot of fun to write. How am I feeling about it? The structure's a little odd. So I'm not sure what alphas and betas will think of that. Little odd meaning it's it's about a trip to Aemea, but about half of it is the trip there, and then half of it's kind of like that happened with actually the King Kong movie that Peter Jackson made, where there's as much stuff happening before you get to the place as actually on the place. And so that's one thing that I'm not concerned about, but I'm wondering how people respond to. I have to say, it's been a real pleasure to write it, because Risson and Lopen are not characters that I get to do a lot of viewpoints from. And if I had to do this from one of the mainline Stormlight characters, I think it wouldn't be nearly as fun because I basically exhaust my excitement for writing about them during the books where they are very involved, and it takes me, 18 months to recuperate and then to get back to it excited again. But I almost never get to write low-pen scenes, and we only get one Rishon scene per book. And they both have really interesting ways of seeing the world, low-pen in particular, and he's a blast to write. Always keeps things fun and interesting. So I posted last week. I'm about 75% of the way done. I've only been able to work on it one day since then because I had some things come in that I needed to do. I'll look through some of the things I'm doing with co-authors, needed my revision on them. And so I spent a couple of days doing a chunk of that. And then yesterday got back to Dawnshard. So I got 2,500 words yesterday, though. So a good amount done. So it's on track to get finished on time or to come out on time. And on time for this should be, in October, mid to late October, so you can read it before Rhythm of War. That's the goal.
Speaking of Rhythm of War, the cover was revealed this week.
Yes, the cover was revealed.
If you haven't seen it, maybe I'll pop it up on the screen in a minute as Brandon's talking about it. But they're wondering, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, how much artistic license Michael has when he's designing the cover, and what I guess your process is with working with him to get the cover vision that you're going for.
So our preference is to give artists a lot of leeway for personal interpretation. I personally believe, any piece of fan art or official art, either way, is that artist's vision of what they saw in their head when they were reading the book. And that's going to differ greatly from what someone else would see. And I like seeing those interpretations. I like seeing those visions. And so we tried to give quite a bit of leeway and flexibility to the artist. And for instance, Michael, being the consummate professional he is, sent 10 sketches of possibilities. And we had ones we liked the most. Unfortunately, they were the same ones that he liked the most. But mostly we say, these are all great. Which one do you enjoy? Which are you most excited to paint? And we move that direction most of the time. Isaac will usually have continuity comments, and we want to make sure that things are in continuity and things like that. But we give a lot of freedom to the artists. We don't really want to chain them down. We want, art to inspire art. And so because of that, we do have people look different in some of our official interpretations. And I think that's okay because, that's how artwork goes. But we're not trying to match a really exacting style guide on the characters usually. And, that lets us have the cover art for the UK cover look very different from the cover art from the US cover, and even have kind of different interpretations on the characters in different ways. We'll catch the big things. We'll say put a glove on her if there's a scandalous hand exposed. We will say, this is what the patch looks like that should be on Kaladin's shoulder, stuff like that. We will do, but we try to give a lot of freedom. I really like this cover. This is my favorite of his covers since the first one. The big question now is whether I have to buy it or not. He always lets the author have first attempt or first, and so it's like, am I willing to let someone else buy that, or do I buy it myself? That is always the question.
Well, you know my vote.
Yes, I know what your vote is. I think if you and Isaac were doing it, we would own all of the original art for everything.
Well, not everything, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What we can get our hands on.
Josh Peddle is wanting to know if you can talk a little bit about some of your experience doing Nanowrimo, as he's going to attempt it
cool.
for the first time this year.
Great. That's a good question. So, for those who don't know, Nanowrimo is National Novel Writing Month. It's this fun thing that a website started up probably 25 years ago now where you challenge yourself to write 50,000 words, which is technically a novel. It's on the short end, but all the Alcatraz books are novels, and they are all in the 50,000 word range. And so you try to do that in 1 month's time. And it is an exercise in order to teach you to turn off your internal editor and to build good habits and write every day. Whether you get all 50,000 words or not is less important than treating it like a professional, a job for a month and trying to decide what that looks like for you. I did it with my friends back in the years before I got published. For instance, the original Way of Kings, a big chunk of that was written during National Novel Writing Month. I always have had a weird intersection with NaNoWriMo's because I don't have the need for that push. I found other motivations to get me pushed, and so very rarely, in fact, maybe never, have I been able to do NaNoWrimo the right way, which is start a new book fresh on November 1st and try to get 50,000 words of it written by the last day of the month. Always before I've been working on something, and usually what we would do in the past is, like I say, Way of Kings was a Nan novel, kind of, right? Like, I had been writing it for like 8 months before, and I did end up finishing it in November, and posted my word counts with all of my friends, like Dan, who was here a couple weeks ago. We were all posting them on a forum that we were part of back in the day, just to kind of encourage one another. And I did do that, but it doesn't really count because, you know, I'd already started something. So if you're doing it for the first time, understand that it is a tool meant to teach you some things that you may or may not need to learn. Most people do well with being forced to turn off their internal editor for a while and write kind of more free-form stream of consciousness, whatever you call it, while they're building good habits for daily writing practice. And that is what I would keep in mind, is the purpose of it. There are some writers for whom this is the wrong way to approach writing a novel. How will you know which one you are? Well, you do NaNoWrimo, and you see if it creates stories, helps you become a better writer in the way you want to be a better writer. You just try it out. And if it's working, what you will find is that you kind of get into the zone of your book. You start to make the connections and things that you that are sometimes hard to make, where since you're so immersed in it, your writing gets better, not worse, despite you forcing yourself to write more than you're comfortable doing. And this does happen quite a lot. What happens with writing is sometimes, particularly as new writers, we stress too much about each word and whether it's going to be good, and we don't focus enough on just continuing to write so we immerse ourselves in that book to the point that our subconscious is always working on it, and we start making plot and character connections so that each bit of writing we do the next day is more and more exciting and builds upon it and things like that. Another good sign that it's working for you will be that you write each day and you're able to build a writing habit in a way that you haven't been able to do in the past. If that happens, then it's done what it's supposed to do. And just try to keep that in mind, is what I'd say. The word count goal is arbitrary. And whether you win or not NaNoWrimo, in my opinion, matters less on what word count did you hit and more on, did you push yourself, write more than you normally were capable of? Did that help you to kind of get into that mindset? And or did it help you to build habits of writing each day when normally you wouldn't? If it does those things, then the tool has served its purpose. When I do my class, the 15-person smaller class that is the workshop that's part of it, they are required to do, I think, 35,000 in 3 months, because I don't want to demand something of them that's going to impact their other schooling and things like that. And so we don't do the 50,000 in 1 month. But what I tell them is, this is an arbitrary number. If this number is too low or too high for you, come talk to me, and we will find one that pushes you to work a little harder than you thought you could before, to hopefully inch you toward being a professional writer. And that generally, when people approach it with that mindset, it helps a lot.
Gordon says, suppose you're writing something that winds up being really niche and weird. Is it worth polishing that?
Yes. This depends, of course, on your writing goals. Let's keep that in mind. The niche and weird things have a much smaller chance of being something that can earn you a living. Doesn't mean they have no chance, right? I would call Lemony Snicket niche and weird, right? Once in a while, the fact that something is niche and weird, am I saying that word right? It sounds wrong in my ears suddenly.
Niche.
Yeah.
Niche. So once in a while, that becomes the big selling point. And I always say that with artwork, the worst thing, the thing you want to avoid the most is having a book that everyone would give 2 stars to, right? A book that everyone thinks is okay but nobody likes. Artwork tends to be much stronger, particularly in a time, sticking around sense. But just better all around if it's a story that a number of people would give 1 star to, but an equal or hopefully much greater number would give 5 stars to. And a niche work like that is more likely to be that. Now, if your goal is to make a full-time living at your writing, then this is more of a long shot. It's less market friendly, and therefore it might be the sort of thing that you decide, you know what, I just cannot take the time on this because I need to be working toward supporting a family at my writing, which means I need to pick the projects that I still love but are more market friendly. But madness kind of can lie in that direction, because you can inch yourself toward that sort of looking for the 2-star book or the 2.5-star book, right? That everyone's going to be okay with and no one's going to love. And a lot of the times that quirkiness and weirdness that makes your niche book unpublishable, well, not unpublishable, less market friendly, is actually the key to figuring out how to write books that are more market friendly but are still in your voice. Dan Wells is a good example of this, where we talked about A Night of Blacker Darkness, which is really niche. It is one of the weirdest books I've ever read. It's, a romantic comedy historical farce that stars major historical figures and a bunch of vampires. And it's just bizarre. And he had a lot of trouble selling that for obvious reasons. But in writing it, he found, this quick banter is something I'm good at. A weird and morbid sense of humor is something that I'm good at. A strong character voice that's really odd is something I'm really good at. And all of those things applied to the book I Am Not a Serial Killer made a much more mainstream hit for him that used all his same skills and was undoubtedly a Dan Wells book and was not compromising at all on his voice. He just happened to find a project that was more naturally market friendly, and he knew what his strengths were, and he played to them. And I'm Not a Serial Killer is a great series because of that. And so if you feel like polishing it, I think you can learn maybe more from that story than you could from another one. But it may not be the thing that sells and makes you a living at writing. It is possible that it will. That's the thing. The Lemony Snickets are out there where the story that should not sell. Oh, I got a marker on my shirt. Oh, this is a dead one. I should mention my proudly representing my these are all the ones I had from last week. So let's I have killed those ones dead. I'm proudly wearing my since we talked about it at one point. This is my Ninjas Can't Catch You If You Are on Fire shirt from Dr. McNinja, Chris Hastings, who is one of my favorite comic writers. Go experience Dr. McNinja if you want something weird and niche that is also brilliant, and kind of a perfect example of someone putting their voice fully on display. And then he became a writer on mainstream comics that still, I think, preserve his quirkiness and his humor quite well.
Nava wants you to talk about writing subplots, and they specifically say, how do you know they are necessary for the story, and how do you develop and integrate them with the main plot?
Great question. So Nava, the biggest question you'll need to ask yourself in this area is what subgenre are you writing in, and what are your goals for that particular novel? The subgenre is usually a good indication of length and reader expectations. An epic fantasy is going to be expected to have way more subplots than a streamlined first-person science fiction book, right? And if you are writing something that's 90,000 words, that's very different from if you're writing something that's 250,000 words. And a big part of that difference is readers of epic fantasy or historicals or epic science fiction are looking for the side plots to fill in the world and characters to bring you a sense of immersion. One of the big reasons we love the epics is that sense of immersion. That's one of the big selling points for a thick fantasy novel as opposed to a fast sword and sorcery novel, is that you're going to get to live in this world and experience it. And so I look for subplots in those which are going to show different perspectives than the main character ones, from a lot of different walks of life, and are going to show off different aspects of the setting or world. This is tricky because you don't necessarily want to set them all across the world. You don't want to make the mistake of making all of the side plots completely separate. You want them to dovetail into the main plot, and that's where the trick becomes. Excuse me. But you do want them to show the breadth of the setting. If it is not an epic, if instead you're like, I'm writing something more streamlined, then generally the purpose of the side plots is just going to depend on your genre and subgenre. For instance, you will often have an adventure story with a romance subplot, or you'll write a romance story with an adventure subplot. And the reason for this is to just add multiple types of tension and multiple types of movement for the story. When the romance is not moving, the adventure can be moving. And when the adventure is not moving, something can happen that night over dinner with the romance, right? And so you can kind of trade off. Television shows tend to do this with the A-plot, B-plot sort of thing, where you have an A-plot, but then you have a side story that you can cut to whenever the A-plot would be a little boring or some time needs to pass. And it's a time-tested and honored tradition in network television. You can do this with multiple different plots that you can then kind of juggle. And one of the other good things about subplots is you want a book's sort of tension to move up and down, generally like this. You want to ramp the tension as it goes. That probably looked weird on the screen to you. It's got like that. Yeah, there you go. Basically, you want ups and downs, you want lulls, you want moments where if your book is always at a 10 on the same emotion and the same scale of emotion, then your reader gets tired very quickly. And if you can switch to different kinds of emotions, then it adds more variety, makes the book more exciting, and it makes it less exhausting. This is why you laugh in an Avengers movie, right? This is why there is a mini subplot in Avengers 1 that is a rivalry between Thor and the Hulk, right? So that you can have payoffs and jokes about this little rivalry, and it is this littlest of little subplots. There's like 3 beats to it. But each one escalates a little, and then you get the great laugh at the end where the Hulk punches Thor out of the frame, right? And it's just a delightful little subplot. You have another subplot, which is much more important, which is the Agent Coulson is really into the Avengers and Captain America and has his dream job and is a little awkward around them. And to not give spoilers, that comes to a very important head in the story as a minor subplot to give a different kind of emotional beat, but also to intersect with the main plot in a way that makes the main plot lock together. It's kind of the piece that makes the entire story work, and it starts as just a little subplot that then dovetails into the main one. Anything you can do to get these subplots to intertwine with your main plot, particularly in the last third of your story are just going to be really helpful. One thing to keep in mind is try to time it so that the subplot climaxes don't all fall on top of one another. Generally, you want one or two subplots to overlap with the main storyline. Star Wars New Hope is a great example of this, a perfect way to use some of these subplots. We have a plot that is, we need to defeat the Death Star. It's where we open Death Star plans, but then we have two subplots. We have Luke needs to learn to trust in the Force and become a Jedi, and we have Han needs to stop being a selfish rogue and support his friends. And all three of those overlap in a matter of 30 seconds. But the whole, we become heroes. Luke is recognized as a great starfighter. The kind of culmination of the mini plot of a romance doesn't have to happen at that point. The kind of subplot with rescue the princess happens and is finished before we move on to the next act. Keeping some of your subplots staggered like that is just a really good idea.
Abnunga from the YouTube chat wants to know what you think of Daniel Green's claim saying you write too much.
Well, Daniel Green made a very amusing video that I don't think he realizes how accurate it is to me. There are the Brandon stand-in is having things taken away from him as he's trying to write. I have been on a plane before. I'm like, oh no, I don't have my computer's out of batteries. All right, I'm gonna write on my phone until my phone runs out of batteries, and then I got out my notebook and continued writing that story until I landed, and then had the story in 3 different places. Too much. It is. I don't know if you want the joking answer. The joking answer is that was one of the most accurate to life and amusing things I've ever seen made about me. The non-joking version is, as a writer, it can be dangerous. And this is not just writers, it's any profession where you are self-employed and or are expected to spend time outside of work on it. This can happen to teachers too. In fact, Mr. Holland's Opus is an entire movie about how being a teacher can take over your life. And being a writer can do the same thing and can cause problems. And so you have to, as a writer, be aware that it can consume everything, and then that's bad, because if you're only writing and not living life to write about, you will run out of material and or become disconnected from the real world very quickly. And so I put in sort of firewalls in my life. I've talked about this before, but when I on most days I stop writing at 5:30, and 5:30 until 10:30 is family time, and I don't put anything in that time that interferes. And even if my family is away, I don't write during that time because I need to keep that time as family time. I try to do the same thing with Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes I have to work Saturdays when the deadline is, but always Sundays. This is no writing. Midnight to midnight is what I do. It's both a religious thing, but also just a good peace of mind thing. No writing, no thinking about books, no kind of going around, backdooring by being like, I'll just write down this one cool sentence I thought of. Just firewall in place during those times, and it's been really helpful for me maintaining a healthy work-life balance. And I also, I've talked about before, I live a pretty great life. Not gonna lie. Part of that is because I've recognized this early on and had some help with people helping me figure it out. But I do my 2 writing sessions, and I generally don't write more than 8 to 10 hours a day, unless there's really a big deadline. And that may, you're like, that sounds like, that's a normal workload, right? And that leaves me 4 hours with my family and 2 hours of video game time, even on a day when, I am doing 10 hours of work because I don't have a commute. And so it's pretty, it's important. I won't say it's easy, but it is totally doable to maintain a good work-life balance, even with something as all-consuming as this.
From the chat, there.
I gotta tell this story. I gotta tell this story. So I was at World Fantasy Convention one year, and I'm sure this is apocryphal, and I'm misremembering it somehow. But there was an author on giving a panel. I was not published then; I was just learning. And the author, as I recall, was Jerry Pournelle. Dan was there too, so you can ask Dan if he remembers it being correct. And the story goes that Jerry Pournelle was on the stage talking with other authors, and he said, "What really gets me is how much Terry Pratchett writes. That guy just writes and writes and writes and writes and writes, and it really bothered me." So one year I thought, I'm gonna beat Pratchett this year. I'm gonna write more than Pratchett. I can't do that because he just writes too fast unless I cheat somehow. So Jerry got his favorite video game of recent years, which was a Wing Commander game, and he sent it to Terry Pratchett and said, "I think you will enjoy this," with the whole plan being to sabotage a few months so that Jerry could get ahead on writing his books. And as he tells the story, he got a letter back a few weeks later from Terry Pratchett that said, "Man, that was a fantastic game. I love that game. It's inspired me to write an entirely new book series, and I haven't been able to stop writing these last few weeks. It has been the most inspiring time of my life. Thank you so much, Jerry, for inspiring me." So there you go. I don't think Jerry or Terry Pratchett are with us anymore. I know Terry passed away, and I remember hearing about Jerry Pournelle as well. So there are no primary sources you can ask anymore if my story is true, so I'm just going to pretend that it is. I did hear that story, but it has now been 20 years, so who knows if I'm remembering it right or wrong.
I think we all want that story to be
yes.
I agree.
There were no other names left, says, or asks.
What a great name.
Yes.
Good job.
Hot dog. Is it a sandwich or a taco?
Oh, well, that is a false dilemma, isn't it? Classical logical fallacy. But if those are my only two options, then it is a sandwich to me. Because a differentiation between a sandwich and a taco is going to be in the bun/tortilla.
Not necessarily the shape.
Not necessarily the shape. That's how I would do it. I actually love these things when people talk about, is cereal a soup? And stuff like that. It is just hilarious to me. But logical fallacy. So I would say sandwich.
Cool. Potato.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
Yes. Is asking you about book translations.
Yes.
They're
okay.
wondering if you are responsible or how you go about making sure details, specifically foreshadowing, don't get lost in translation.
This is really hard. And there's not really much we can do. We make ourselves available to the translators, and we try our best to explain things to them when they ask, but we do not handle the translation ourselves. The way this goes about is you sell the rights as an author, you sell to a foreign publisher, and that publisher is in charge of translating the book and releasing it and packaging it for their country. And we basically have to try to pick companies that have a good track record of this and hope to do our best. It gets annoying when normally the UK is supposed to take exactly what I write, and I found an edition of the UK Final Empire that edited a line that was slightly, shall we say, grammatically conspicuous. That was grammatically conspicuous on purpose because it was foreshadowing for the third book, and some overzealous copy editor changed that to be the way it should be and ruined the foreshadowing for the entire series. And I don't know how long that typo was in there. We had words with the British publisher about that one because this happens, and that poor copy editor, they couldn't have known that was there intentionally. But this is part of Peter's job on the English edition, on the American edition, is to make sure that stuff is preserved, and he's really good at it. We can't do that with the translations because we just don't speak the languages. So we have to trust you guys to read and tell us what you think of the translations and what's working and what isn't. This is why we tend to really like people like our Spanish publisher in Barcelona and my French publisher, where I've been able to meet the translators and talk with them, and we have a really good relationship with the publisher. And the publisher, listens to us and tweaks things if they are done wrong and things like that. Like Spain did complete retranslations of a few books and stuff like that. And there are a couple of places that we feel very confident in. Because we know the publisher so well. But there are a lot of places that it's not that the publisher is bad, we just don't know them as well, and so it's harder for us to have as much confidence. And we hear from fans sometimes about various translations, and we always like to hear that through my website. If you have a thumbs up or a thumbs down, if you're bilingual and have read both, and you can be like, this isn't working so well, then yeah, let us know. But normally we have pretty fantastic relationships with a lot of our foreign publishers, and the translators are awesome and do a lot of work and deserve more recognition because a lot of translators, like my Chinese editions, right? She is essentially a co-author for those books because the language differences are big enough that a lot of metaphors have to be changed to make sense and things like that. And these are my Taiwanese books, and that's why there is they do a fantastic job. And as far as I know, as far as Taiwanese readers have told me, but it's good to have that relationship. I'll say that, and it's good for you guys to weigh in and send us emails. We always watch for those.
Talleyrand is wondering hoping that you can talk a bit about your research methods and practices. And they specifically say, how do you prioritize what subject matter to become an expert in versus just getting a base knowledge in?
Right. That one's pretty easy for me. I'm going to get out Jello's treats.
And they do specifically ask if there's something you focused on specifically for the Wheel of Time or Stormlight.
Okay. All right. Do you want to do some tricks? Can you use the Force? Good bird. Yes. He's decided he wants to say that because anything he says, he knows will get him a treat if he says the thing that he's supposed to do. But or he thinks that if he says it himself, he can give himself the treat. So when he's hungry, he will start going through all the things. Will you do dragon? No, that's the other one. He thinks that nowadays this is the easiest one for him to do. Do dragon. Lift your wings. Not going to do it today. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the one you want to do. You got to do dragon. Dragon. This is what he's been doing the last few weeks. Is he's realized that if he just waits, then sometimes we'll just go back to the other one, which is the one he likes to do. But I'm not gonna today. I'm not gonna. You have to do dragon. Do dragon. Now. You don't want to do it? Yeah. We'll come back in a few minutes and see if you're willing to. Because what happened is we inadvertently, when he would be lazy and not want to do that one, we'd be like, oh, well, I've got the treat. So then we would give him the first one. And you notice I'm not cueing him for them because I'm not ready to give him a treat on them. So I'm not saying the actual phrase. And so what we inadvertently taught him is if he's stubborn and just does the trick that he wants to do, we will eventually let him do that trick and get the treat. So now we have to back off on that and not give him the treat because he has decided he's going to do one trick. And he will do the other two tricks he knows how to do himself when he feels like it. And will give himself the order and then do it, mostly if he wants to get our attention. But he doesn't like to do them on cue anymore. So we will see if we can train him back into that. So research. Easy answer is I consider it more important for me to be a generalist and learn a little about a lot of things than it is for me to become an expert in any one area. This is because if you can learn enough about a topic to learn the things you don't know, you can ask the right questions and get expertise on them. If you can get it close enough that it's not fundamentally wrong at the core, that it is little tweaks, then you are going to be in better shape. This is, for Stormlight, I did do a little bit more research on field medicine and this sort of things like, when would they cauterize? When would they actually use a tourniquet? When did they? What is accurate and what isn't? And of course, mental health things I spend a lot more time on because I want to be responsible, shall we say, in my portrayals of people's mental health. Because I think that's a place where I could do a lot of danger, and I think that media often does do dangerous things that make the problem worse for a lot of people instead of better. So I try my best on that for Stormlight. But a lot of areas like historical martial arts, or the science of this or that. I become a generalist, and then I ask hopefully the right questions of experts, and I give scenes to experts, and even the things that I'm more of an expert on, I give to bigger experts or people who have firsthand knowledge and experience. Because as much as you read about depression, if you yourself do not have it, which I do not, then there is a level of authenticity, I think, that can only be lent by letting somebody who knows exactly what they're talking about read and give some feedback. I recommend that authors become a generalist in most things and cultivate experts who can help them. And an expert doesn't have to be like a psychologist. It can be a first-hand account, right? People who can read and tell you what you're doing wrong. And then generally it is a good idea to become more of an expert in a couple things that really fascinate you. Pick the things that you're excited by. Pick the things that if you research about, you will enjoy doing all of that research, and that will fuel your writing rather than making the research a chore that you feel you have to do in order to get to your writing. That is my recommendation.
Ben wants to know if there's any books that have been released in recent years that have grabbed you the most in terms of personal investment or enjoyment, or if there are any books you can't wait to get your hands on right now that are coming out in the near future.
Well, like most of the world, I would really like to read Doors of Stone, and am waiting patiently for that. I really liked Darker Shade of Magic. I thought that was a fantastic book. It's probably the best book I've read in a few years. Really an interesting setting and great voice and things like that. So that's probably the book that grabbed me the most recently. Though there's other things that I've read and enjoyed as well. Like I just finished Jancy and her co-author, Jancy and Megan, I think, wrote it together. The Sunken City.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Good book. Jancy and Megan are great writers.
Sinking City.
Sinking City. That's what it is. Yeah. And so, anything that you find a blurb on or you find on my Goodreads are books that I enjoy. And I don't if I enjoy a book, then I'm going to on my Goodreads, I don't give things less than 5 stars. This is not because qualitatively I wouldn't be able to match what is a 5-star book and what is a 4-star book and things, but my job is not to be a book reviewer. I leave that to other people. If I enjoyed the book, I have this listed on my Goodreads at some point. I give it 5 stars and I tell you why I liked it. It's the write-up about it that I would recommend that you read for things like that. But mostly, if I liked a book, I'm going to give it a thumbs up. Just consider Brandon a thumbs up or thumbs down reviewer. And thumbs up means this is worth looking into. And I enjoyed it. So,
Lauren
is Is this our Lauren, or is this a different Lauren?
I'm assuming different Lauren.
My sister's name is Lauren, so.
They say, if you found yourself as an apprentice in the Cosmere, who would you like as a mentor figure and why?
Oh boy, who would I like as a mentor figure and why? I would probably pick someone boring in Silverlight because I do not necessarily want to be involved in the great workings of the Cosmere because there is a lot of danger involved in that. I would stay far away from Hoyd. Chris would not be bad, but she gets into a lot of dangerous situations, and I'm not sure that I would recommend letting her get you into those situations. How about that? So, yeah, there you go. Vasher, definitely right out. Don't be near Vasher if you value not getting your soul sucked into a dangerous black sword. But yeah, that's, I'm not sure if I could come up with a name. If I have to name somebody that is going to be named, maybe Vistim. He was a good mentor, and yeah, he traveled a lot, but he was really careful. Granted, he did have his apprentice jump off a great shell's head, but that was more her fault than his. And I think he would take really good care of an apprentice, and
and he knows his way around.
He knows his way around, so he's a pretty good mentor.
Jordan says, have you ever scrapped an idea because you decided it would be better as a movie, TV show, or video game and not a book?
No, I haven't done that. I have, the only one that's close to that is Dark One. When I wrote it out, it did feel more like a TV show, but I didn't scrap it, right? I went ahead and made it a graphic novel and sold the TV rights. There are things I've chosen not to write as books because I feel like they don't fit the format as well, but that's the only one that really pops out at me. In other cases, I've written it as a novella or something like that when it didn't feel like a book. There are ideas I scrap just because they don't feel right to me as a novel or the right place in my career, but it's not that I'm specifically thinking this would be better as a video game. If I knew it would make a really great video game, I would just try to get the video game made.
Ryle has a very interesting question. They say, do you ever feel limited by the commitment you've made with the massive writing of the Cosmere? Or is there enough variety within the Cosmere to keep you happy and feel like you have some flexibility to do what you want to do with your writing ideas and preferences, especially as they change?
Yeah, the answer is no. Fortunately, I designed the Cosmere as the thing I wanted to do. And I had essentially been writing the Cosmere for like 8 books before I sold. So I knew pretty well that I would have enough flexibility and things like this. I am very excited by large-scale continuity, connections between stories, watching eras come and pass in epic storylines and things like that. I've never felt constrained by it. If anything, once in a while I feel constrained by contracts coming at the wrong time when I'm super excited by something else. Like when a deadline is coming due and I'm like, I need to get off of this and write this other thing. And that's just a matter of it's a function of the popularity that we enjoy, that I've talked about before. I think that if I were, I'm not going to go back to this, but when I were a little less popular, the publishers would sit on books for like 2.5 years after I turned them in to find the right place to publish them, or the right time. And the bottom line of the entire company was not appreciably affected by my book releasing. Nowadays, the bottom lines of companies are appreciably affected by my books releasing, and so they don't sit on them. You don't turn in a Stormlight book and have it come out 2.5 years later. Fans would probably have a heart attack if they knew we were doing that. But what it meant is that this buffer that I had vanished unexpectedly out from underneath us. And so suddenly everything I'm writing is at the last moment that it could get, the last possible moment for it to be turned in, to be published, is generally when it's getting turned in. And this is just because people are really excited to get the books out. But what that means is that things will happen where it's like in an ideal world, I don't think I would have gone straight from Rhythm of War into Dawnshard. It turned out to be okay because I was writing different enough characters, but I really like space between books in the same series as a way to refresh myself. And ideally, I would have written the next Skyward book and maybe the next Wax and Wane book, and then done Dawnshard, and then written the next Skyward book, and then come back to Stormlight. But that just wasn't possible because of the timelines that I've set out. Dawnshard really needs to be out before Rhythm of War comes out. And because of that tight deadline, then I'm on another tight deadline, which now means that writing the next Skyward book has to happen next because my YA publisher has been waiting very patiently without a book for quite a while. And while I probably would want to go to Wax and Wane 4 next, because I've been away from that even longer, Wax and Wane 4 is for the same publisher that's now publishing Rhythm of War, and they've got plenty to do and are plenty busy, and I need to get something to the other publisher. So these sorts of things are the annoyances of the reality of being a professional writer. But I never feel constrained by the Cosmere. That's not a thing I've ever felt constrained by. I've never felt constrained by, I promised, 10 Mistborn books or whatever. It's actually 9. No, 12. 12 now? No, 9. 9 with a potential for 12. I think it's 10. It's 10, right? No, it's 13.
Yeah.
13.
Because number 2 is 4.
Yes. Yeah, group 2 is 4, and we added group 2 anyway. This is just what you get when I'm talking and writing at the same time, is I have to actually stop and rewind and say, what am I saying?
Good problem to have written so much.
Yeah, 4 eras of Mistborn with 1 extra book in the second era. Do I feel constrained by that? No, I feel really excited by that. That's never been an issue. Do I feel constrained by the fact that I really need to get Skyward 2 or 3 and 4 and Wax and Wane done in time to get back to Stormlight 5, to have Stormlight 5 come out on a reasonable timescale? That I do feel constrained by.
Ingrid from the chat says that she's getting ready to start her MFA in writing this upcoming Monday. She says, I am making the right decision, right?
Where are you going? That's what I want to know. Yeah, it's going to be lost in the chat. So yes, MFAs can be very, very useful. My advice for getting an MFA from someone who does not have one, because I just have an MA. I did not get the F in my name. They added the F to the degree several years after I graduated. I'm not bitter at all. For those who don't know, an MFA is a terminal degree in creative writing. It's a Master's of Fine Art. It's just, consider it like halfway between a master's and a PhD. It's a more involved, more difficult master's degree that's supposed to indicate professional mastery over an art.
And they're attending Lindenwood University?
Okay, I'm not familiar with Lindenwood University, but a couple things that I would recommend to you. Number one, do not let them persuade you that you can't write what you love. Some degree programs are better than others, but a lot of MFA programs have a certain style of writing that they are trying to get writers to write in, and they do it, I think, almost unconsciously or unintentionally. But MFAs have been charged with the problem of churning out the same people with the same voice and things like that, and being very unfriendly to genre fiction if you like writing genre fiction. Be aware, however, that writing in different styles and different genres is really useful for a writer. So a professor who says, I want to teach you to write this style of writing, isn't necessarily giving you bad advice, but you should be able to write that, learn what you want from it, and incorporate it into the style of writing you want to write, rather than being turned into a carbon copy. So be aware of that issue. Be aware that an MFA program, oftentimes the contacts you make with the other students and also with the professors are more important than the instruction you will get, right? an MFA is in many ways a chance to go take a dry run at being a professional writer, where nobody expects you to have a real job while you're doing an MFA. I mean, you'll have to have something to live on, but you don't have to have another career while you're doing it, because being a student is your career. It gives you a couple of years to be like, I'm going to try writing quite a bit, and see what it's like to be a writer, make contacts with all these other writers, live a writing sort of lifestyle, if that's a thing that even really exists, and network a whole bunch. So use that. For me, generally, the most valuable thing to my master's in creative writing was that it gave me a 2-year break to really think about being a writer, and gave me a lot of contact with other writers doing the same thing, and with professors who were writing themselves. What the danger of the MFA was that they did try to, I was pretty sure what voice I wanted to have and what I wanted to do with my career. And I did have a number of professors who were like, I don't want you writing fantasy. I want you writing this. And I'm like, I'm going to write what you want, but it's going to be fantasy, right? If you want me to write with a literary voice, I'm definitely going to try that because I want to learn. If you want me to write poetry, I want to try that because I want to learn. But it's going to be fantasy because that's what I do. And so you're going to get, if I'm writing, you want me to write in a literary voice, I'm going to write magic realism like Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Not that I could, but that's the style that I would practice. And things like that. Like, I knew what I wanted to do. And I had a great big chip on my shoulder, which, worked out for me. It worked out just fine. The professors were generally okay with that when I said, no, this is the art I'm making. I'm going to learn from you. I'm going to try the styles that you recommend. But I'm going to make it my art. And none of them ever gave me bad grades for that, but maybe they would in a different program or something like that. It also did help that I sold a book 1 year into my master's degree, which was super intimidating to all of them, because most writing programs do not have people teaching at them that are making a living at their writing. This doesn't mean that they aren't professional. There are some categories of writing where there just isn't enough sold to make people be able to live full-time on it. Poetry is like this. Generally, far fewer people can make a living only writing poetry. And a lot of the people at universities are writing high-caliber, professional quality poetry, but it's hard to make a living on that. Same thing with short stories. It's really hard to make a living on short stories these days. And you can be, you could be top 100 short story writers in the country and not make a living at it. If you're top 100 in any sort of novel category, literary or not, you are making a good living at your writing. So there are just some things that are like that. And so be aware of that, be cognizant of that, but also be aware that there's a decent chance that if you write consistently, you will soon become the most experienced person in the classroom. And that can be, I was in many of the classrooms I was in the most experienced by far as a writer. I had just written more stories. It was very odd to me when I would get into this classroom and the professor would say, all right, everyone, it's going to be a really difficult workshop. You're each going to have to prepare 3 different things of at least 2,000 words. And I would be like, 3 different things of 2,000 words. All right, I just did Nanowrimo. I wrote 50,000 words last month. They weren't polished words. It does take a lot of work to get those polished, but surely a high-level 500-level class at a university could require a little bit more. But to a lot of the students, that was super intimidating, and they were taking the MFA program in part to give them deadlines. And, that was me in my little bubble, being Brandon, who does, as we've discussed, write quite a bit. Not recognizing that everybody has different writing speeds. And if you were taking 3 workshop classes and each of them required 6,000 words, and that's 18,000 words of polished work, and you were writing in a style that takes a little bit longer, that could be quite the workload for a semester. So, but just be aware. Just be aware that there will be a lot of people for whom the idea of polishing and getting one story ready will be very intimidating. And depending on your writing style and speed, you may quickly outpace people in your program.
Hannah says, if video games existed in the Cosmere, which current Cosmere character that we know would be the best gamer?
Best gamer?
Let's see if your guess or your statement is the same as mine.
Ooh, best gamer. Who wants to sit down and game?
See, and that's going outside of mine. I'm not saying that my character probably would not want to, but I think they'd be very good at it.
Very good at gaming. Very good at gaming. Lift.
Oh, Lift would probably enjoy it. Mine is Sazed because he can store his speed and stuff.
Yes, Sazed would be technically, you're right, would be way, way better. If you can, I don't know if Wayne could load time and put in inputs and then they would come out. I don't know how that would work.
Is the TV outside of his bubble?
Yeah, the TV would have to be outside of his bubble. How would that work?
Wireless signal when it
wireless signal is going to have a redshift. Physicists, what happens if a redshift happens to your as I understand, that actually wouldn't change it appreciably, but we'd let a physicist say on that. But regardless, Sazed would definitely have a big leg up. I think
probably really be any of the terrorist people.
Yes.
I guess that were. Anyway,
that's a good answer. That's a very good answer.
Let's see. Katie wants to know. She says Brandon and team, but we'll keep it to you. Do you have a collection of signed books? If so, which is your most treasured book?
My most treasured book is probably the signed copy of Eye of the World that Jason Denzel gave me. It is my only signed Wheel of Time book. I never managed to get one while Mr. Jordan was alive, and he got me one. Jason did, and so that's my most prized possession. Followed probably by my signed by Jane Yolen copy of Dragon's Blood, which
Jane Yolen.
Yeah,
Dragon's Blood was her.
Yeah, Dragon's Blood. You're thinking Dragon's Bane, which is Barbara Hamley, which is also I do have signed and a fantastic book. But Jane was probably the first pro I met, other than Orson Scott Card, who I waited in line and got a signed copy of one of his books. I've been waiting to meet Jane for a long time, and I gushed quite a bit. And she remembers, because she reminds me when I meet her again now. Stop gushing, Brandon. You did that once already. I don't have a huge collection of signed books. One of my goals is to get my favorite books bound in leather and have a big library of them, but I just haven't gotten around to that. That would be a cool thing to do. I could get that. So the Eye of the World that I have is kind of falling apart. It's the trade paperback edition of Eye of the World. It's a first, but it's the library edition, a very rare edition, but it is kind of falling apart. So it might be better to just get that bound into leather or something like that and have it start off the collection. I don't know if Jason's watching, but Jason, I do remember that wonderful gift that you gave me.
From the chat on Facebook, Zachary says, should I stop watching you and go right?
Yeah. Stop watching me and go right. You've heard plenty of me. Now it's time for you to go get something done. And
you can always watch it later.
You can always watch it later. Magellan says that you should write. That's what it means when he bites his bubble wrap, is that you should go right.
Carl is wondering if there's ever a chance of us having a Euro-friendly time on any of these streams.
Oh yeah, we should totally do that.
We should maybe take that into
yeah,
consideration. I know we've done one mid-afternoon, but that was really early on.
We could do one on Thursday that's more Euro-friendly. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's the sort of thing that it's good for us to get pointed out to us. And so...
I mean, we kind of got into a routine
Yeah.
of this time. So yeah, we'll look at that.
This
Carl.
is a very easy time for me, but yeah, we could totally do that at some point. Or we could do it really late, which is also a very easy time for me. Everybody else would... Wait, you guys, like, stay here until, like, midnight now anyway, don't you?
We stay pretty late.
Yeah, so we could do one. Let's see. Europe is going to be 7 hours
7 to
ahead.
8. Yeah.
8 hours
Depends on what
ahead.
part of Europe. I
so-
think the UK is 8.
So if we did it at 10 p.m. here, it still wouldn't be very Euro-friendly there.
It'd really have to be right first thing when you start in the day.
It'd have to be right like at noon our time. If we wanted to go late, it would have to be, to get like noon in Europe, we would have to be here at like 5 or something. So probably not. Yeah. So yes, one day when I get up, maybe a day when one of my phone calls has been canceled for some reason or something, then we can just be like, Brandon's gonna stream first thing.
We will take a look at it. Nehemiah says, I was wondering what you would do in a Game of Thrones type situation that he outlines right here. He says, for example, let's say that a Stormlight show would come out in the next few years, and the show undoubtedly outpaces you in writing the books. Would you tell the writers of the show the outline of the ending like what was done with Game of Thrones, or would you make the show wait a few years for you to catch up right on your writing, or do you think you would even have much of a say in the matter?
So I have started arranging my life film-wise so that I have more of a say in the matter. I'm getting to enough prominence in the field that I'm just starting to get powerful enough to kind of make demands like that. And so that's good, right? That's giving me a little more control. I think we have a nice situation with Stormlight, where if it were Stormlight and Mistborn, either one, there are multiple eras. There is no way a show starting right now could outpace me for book 5, right? Because even if you did 1 year for each book, 1 season for each book, that's 4 years, and Stormlight 5 is due to come out 3 years from this fall. And so assuming no major illnesses or things like that, and what I can do is just say, look, you guys got to wait for Era 2, because it's going to be 10 years in world between them. Let's give it 5 years in the real world and let me get ahead of you again. The difference between myself and George is I am much more of an outliner than George is. And so providing an outline for where the series would go would be, I think, easier for me than it probably was for him. Knowing what little I know of George, he is a discovery writer and a gardener. And a lot of gardeners, it's not like they don't know where their story is going. What they don't know is how exactly they're going to get there. And a lot of the genius of a writer of George Martin is in knowing what's going to happen and then getting there in a way that feels really satisfying, right? That's what a gardener is really good at doing. And so, on one hand, I'm not surprised that Season 8 of Game of Thrones turned out as poorly as it did, because you have a gardener say, I'm going here, and you don't have somebody writing who has the same kind of genius that George Martin has in getting there. Like, if you would have told, I think, most Game of Thrones fans, after reading book 1, oh yeah, Jaime's going to be your favorite by this book, they'd be like, what? No, I hate that guy. He threw a kid out a window. Right? But, that's what George is really good at doing. And so some of those things that happened in Season 8, I think that fans are going to be very satisfied with George's approach to them, because that's the type of writer he is. That's what he's really good at doing. But it meant that replicating that without actually seeing the path that he's going to take proved very, very difficult for the showrunners. And not surprisingly so, knowing in hindsight what I know about George's writing process and what part of what makes George a genius as a writer. I think part of my skills as a writer come in being able to do setup and payoff very well, and being able to have a plan that, though it changes, I am able to incorporate these things as I'm going along and know where I'm going, so that things like the little sentence mentioned about Mistborn can become really relevant by book 3 in the right way. And so I think that I would not necessarily have the same challenges, but that just means there's probably other hidden challenges that we're not aware of that could get us in trouble. So probably better if we just made them wait between eras until the era was finished.
PM says, as a writer, how do you avoid rationalizing mistakes? Whenever I find inconsistencies or mistakes while editing, I tend to make excuses for them. For example, if someone does something out of character, I usually think, actually, it would make sense for him to do that because of XYZ. Therefore, I don't have to change it.
Yeah, this is a legit problem you're noticing. And part of what makes it so sticky a problem is that sometimes you're right to just rationalize it, right? Sometimes you are correct. And more often than not, you aren't. But this is really the reason to have beta readers. This is why I believe in them so strongly. Not all writers use them, but I feel like something happened in Rhythm of War, right, where the beta readers were all saying, "Oh man, this thing," and Peter came to me and was like, "Man, this seems like a really big problem with the book." I'm like, "Oh no, I've thought about this. I'm just going to go this other direction and do this thing, and it'll fix it." And he's like, "Oh wow, why didn't you do that fix in the initial draft? Why did you write it this way?" And the reason is that I thought that it was okay, that the rationalization was okay, that it was working, when it turns out I was wrong, and the beta readers were all noticing the thing was a problem in ways that part of me had known. But the thing is, there are an equal number of those that I made the right choice on, and the beta readers didn't have a problem with it, and changing it would have been zigging when I needed to zag, or zagging when I needed to zig, And so, basically, I try not to be lazy. I try to ask myself, am I saying this because it's going to take a lot of work? But there's also the question there of sometimes problems are what I call above the fold and below the fold, which is like a newspaper thing, so the metaphor is really bad. But basically, there's like a line, and above this line is stuff that's that I need to change for my own artistic integrity and for the integrity of the book, and below it are things I would like to change, but you know what? There's not all the time in the world, and we can't take 20 years to write these books like Tolkien took to write his. An example of this from Wheel of Time is I just love this one. Robert Jordan had a horse named Stayer, and then called the horse Stepper in a book later on, or vice versa, right? Wheel of Time fans would be able to tell me. I remember reading an interview where someone's like, "Hey, did you get the name of this horse wrong?" He's like, "No, I just got a new horse." And as a writer, I'm like, "No, he didn't. You forgot the name of the horse. We all do it. You probably had it as one name during one part of the draft of the book, and then it got changed to a name you liked better later on, but then you forgot and you wrote the next book," because I do this like all the time. Ask Karen. And you just ended up using that name, but that's a below the fold change. You know what? It does not materially change anything. In fact, it creates a big headache for everyone. Just say, "Oh, you got a new horse." Problem solved, right? That's a good rationalization. I'm not calling Robert Jordan out. I'm pointing out this is an author who understands at some point you just can't keep tweaking things, and you have to say, "No, he got a new horse." And so it is this balance between where do you say, "Oh, he got a new horse," and where do you say, "Oh man, I need to go make that change." And this is going to come down to your own kind of personal artistic vision, what your beta readers say, and how big a problem you think it is, and what stage the book is in, right? Like, it's a lot easier to make these changes when you're making a second draft change than it is when we're right now, where we are a few weeks away from the very last proofread being able to be turned in. And that is the last time any changes can be made before the book goes to print. And you have another chance to review the manuscript when you go to paperback. But we tried making changes during that time, and it just caused a whole lot of confusion. So we try to make those changes all invisible changes, rather than changes people would notice. So there you go.
Jake says, do you see yourself ever releasing any more Sanderson curiosities, and if so, when?
The response to Way of Kings Prime was strong enough that I would at least like to release in hardcover form the good ones. The good books from the Sanderson's curiosities are White Sand, Aether of Night, and Dragonsteel. They are all of an equivalent quality, I would say, as in being slightly worse than Elantris. Slightly, maybe significantly worse, but of a similar sort of, has similar problems or things like that. They are all good enough books that I don't think you waste your time reading them. They're just not good enough books that I would want to mass release them. They are, I think, great books to read as somebody who's like, this is one of Brandon's early books that could have gotten published, good enough to get published, but didn't quite make it there. And I think people can have a lot of fun with those. So I would imagine that we do one of these per Stormlight Kickstarter, because we will probably continue to do, you're nodding over there, the Stormlight Archive books are just a big enough thing, and require a big enough gear up and enough funds and things that we'll probably continue to do one of those every 3 years. Don't panic.
Thank you.
We will continue to do other leatherbounds not as Kickstarters. They have smaller print runs, and we probably will continue to do all of those in bonded leather and things like that, and then do the Stormlight books and Kickstarters, and we'll probably have a new curiosity each time. So I would expect us to have White Sand, Dragonsteel, and Aether of Night Sanderson curiosities in the next 3 of these Kickstarters. And then we'll take a long, hard look at what we have left. Because after that, we start to... we go down another jump in quality. We have Mistborn Prime and Final Empire Prime, which are probably the next 2 in quality, where they aren't bad books, and I think they're readable, but they're just a little step further away from what ended up being my vision. But I mean, I think that White Sand and Dragonsteel and Aether Night are probably a little bit stronger of novels than Way of Kings Prime. So maybe Final Empire Prime and Mistborn Prime are both kind of equivalent to that. Then after that, we have another big dip in quality, and then you get things like Star's End, which was my second novel. You get things like Nightlife, which was my attempt at a comedic sort of Bob Asprin myth adventures style comedy, mostly cringe with a little bit of actual comedy. And the book I called The Sixth Incarnation of Pandora, which is a cyberpunk look at immortality and things like that, where people have been turned into super weapons with nanites and stuff like that. And I have no idea how that book measures up anymore. It's the book I wrote right before Elantris. But those ones I could even see releasing those. Then we have a huge dip in quality for White Sand Prime and Lord Mastral Prime, which are the first versions, the first books I wrote, and are really bad. And then Mythwalker, which is the one I didn't finish because it just wasn't any good. And those are the other Sanderson curiosities. I would not expect us to ever release those. Those are just bad enough that they aren't worth charging you for. Whereas a lot of these books are things I was experimenting with and exploring with and getting better at. They're my journeyman works. The White Sand, the first version, White Sand Prime, and Lord Mastral are the equivalent of the stuff you do as a filmmaker in high school with your parents' camera, right? Your parents' phone. When you make your own Indiana Jones movie with your parents' phone, when you're 16, that's the equivalent of what you would be getting, and I just don't know that I could charge people for that. Maybe we'll put them up free on my website. If people really want to complete the collection, they can print them and have them bound themselves.
I'm sure people will say yes to whatever you're willing to show.
Yeah. Kara, what are we signing now? Looks like UK Rhythm of War.
Yeah, it's a special promotion.
A special promotion. What is the special promotion? Do we know yet, or can we announce it? Or?
Yeah. So I think it's similar to the
posters.
The posters that you did.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So these are pretty cool because these are book plates that I'm signing that have the cover art incorporated in them, and you can, because I won't be able to go to the UK, can stick them in your book when you get it. If you would rather have one of these than the signed tip-in pages. Or, you can stick them on your Trapper Keeper for things. Do kids have Trapper Keepers these days?
I don't think so.
I don't think that they do.
That, but yeah.
Yes, they all have laptops. You stick it on the back of your laptop when you're in 4th grade, right?
And just going back, if you have been interested in reading White Sand, there's a link in the description where you can sign up for Brandon's newsletter.
Yeah.
And in the confirmation email you get from us, you can see
There's
a
a
link to
where
download it.
And sometimes people don't get those, but Adam, I see, is pretty good at watching for people to write back and say, I didn't get this, and sending them
if you
it
talk
directly.
about it on the Stormlight subreddit, or I have talked to the mods there, and they can provide you with
They
the
can
link,
provide you the link too. Good.
to get to the newsletters.
Yeah.
And if you sign up for the newsletters, you also get to read early content. Like the last one we sent a few weeks ago had the prologue of Dawnshard. Very early look at that, obviously.
Yeah, very early.
And if you sign up for it, obviously you can read that. And then if you miss any of the other ones in the past, actually, I just found this out.
Oh yeah, you can just cycle through.
If you click on the upper right corner, there's a little button that says View in your browser, and if you click on that, there should be another button on the top that you look at all of the newsletters we've sent in the past. So you can catch up on all of the newsletters.
You can go read about Freya,
exactly
the closet kitten. Freya the closet kitten, by the way, is doing very well. We should bring her on sometime. That would panic her.
Hate that.
She would hate it. But she's a very brave cat now. She goes out in the garage and hunts flies and things. So, yeah, she's like and she comes out into the main room when kids are there that she doesn't even know, and she keeps a good watch on them, but...
I think my motorcycle boots must be very loud because she runs away from me as soon as I enter the house.
Well, anytime anyone enters the house, even if it's someone she knows, she runs away. She won't, but she will then creep back out, even if people she doesn't know are there. But yeah, and you can read Aether of Night. I gave that to 17th Shard, to give away to people. So if you want to read the ebook of that, White Sand and 17th Shard and Aether of Night are readable books. They both have big problems. Aether of Night has the problem that it feels like two different books. There's like a romantic comedy happening at the same time as a dire war, an invasion by dark forces. And the two books don't really work well together. It's like a Shakespearean mistaken identity romantic comedy going on, opposite that. And White Sand just has the problem that it's about 30% too long, overwritten for what the plot actually is. We fixed that when making it a graphic novel, but some people like the prose version instead, so you can get that and read it. White Sand is canon to the Cosmere, with the tweaks made to the graphic novel. I don't ever intend to rewrite White Sand, though I do intend to someday have other things happening in that world. So that one is canon. Aether of Night is not. Even though there's a shard pool and a shard in it, the events that are happening in that book are not canon. Aethers are, you've seen them pop up here and there, but the actual events of the story aren't.
Corrine wants to know, what are the big mistakes that new writers are making?
So every new writer makes their own host of mistakes. So it's hard to point to one, partially because each writer is so individual. Right? Like, what is a mistake for one writer could be the right thing for another writer. Great example of this is, me and Pat. Pat Rothfuss spent the same number of years I was writing a whole bunch of different books, polishing his one book and getting really good at revision. And he ended up releasing a fantastic book out of that, where I had heard the advice, don't focus on one book. Write and teach yourself to write, which was good advice for me, and write a bunch of different things so you explore lots of different genres and subgenres and styles, and build good habits by doing that. And what happened is Pat got really good at prose, and so his prose is beautiful, but writing consistency did not whatever. I mean, I don't like to comment on other people's processes, but it seems like it's something I learned very well, writing consistency, but my prose is not on the level that Pat's prose is on. And so those two different journeymanships, as you will, taught us different things, which are both great assets to us in our career, but also left us with things we still need to learn. I still, every book, am practicing and getting better at my prose, and I think that my prose in Rhythm of War is just way better than it was in Way of Kings. That's so. What mistakes do we make? It's so individual, right? One thing that I would say these days is newer writers should be looking very carefully at both. I signed one on that sheet and then put it aside. At both traditional publishing and indie publishing, and kind of hybrid styles. I think new writers make a mistake in not learning the business. In other words, not treating themselves like a small business owner who's starting a new business, which is what you're doing when you start writing. You are starting a business. Now, that business, you don't have to actually incorporate and stuff like that until you're actually making money. So that's not what I mean. But since you're starting a business, you really should learn how that business works, how the money gets to people, what it means to have an agent and all of these things, and why would you want one and why would you not want one? Taking kind of control over the business side and training yourself that you're going to have to learn those things, I think is important, and I don't think we teach that enough to new writers. I think that majority of new writers do better by teaching themselves to write consistently in a variety of things, as opposed to writing one thing and trying to perfect it. I've seen a lot of people try to go the Pat Rothfuss route and never actually learn to write, just get very intimidated by the concept of revision and tweak the same chapter for literally 10 years, one chapter, trying to get it perfect before they'll let themselves write chapter 2. That's real dangerous. But on the other side, I think the mistake I made was by discounting the value in learning to do a good, solid revision. It took me a long time to learn that, where I would just rather be like, I'm going to write a new book that doesn't have the problems this old book has. It's going to be very individual to you, what things are mistakes and what things aren't. A great example of this that I often show. You want to try? You going to do it? Dragon. No, that's not it. We can do it if I stand up. Okay. Dragon. There you go. Good bird. Yeah. What he really wants is attention more than the treat. So I'm going to let him be on my hand for a second while he eats this. He knows how to do it. He knows what to do. He's just lazy, aren't you? You a lazy bird? You lazy stinker bird? You want a scritch? You're a very good bird. All right. No, you can't. This is what I have to deal with during the day, by the way, because he climbs down on top of me and then wants to sit on me while I'm trying to write. And then to grab him, be like, nope, you can't do that. Good bird. You need to go play with your toys while we're writing. But you are a very good bird, and you did your trick, so I'll give you another nut. Another example of this is generally the piece of advice I give to people is don't fixate on one world and one setting. because as a new writer, if you write 3 different books and 3 different styles and genres, and 3, even if you all love epic fantasy, 3 different first books in epic fantasy, it'll teach you a lot more, and you will be able to market. You know, you can send out those books to editors. You can't, if an editor rejects book 1, you can't really send them book 2 of the same series, at least not in a continuous fantasy. If it were something like Discworld where they were different characters and things, you could. But Naomi Novik just, ignored that advice. Not that I gave it to her, but if someone had. And she wrote 3 books in the Temeraire series, and they were all fantastic. And she sold them, and what happened is she was just able to hit the ground running because, she sold a book, and then the publisher's like, all right, what else? And she's like, well, I have 2 finished books in this series. So they released those 1 a month for 3 months in paperback to just blitz release her. All her eggs were in that basket, but it was a really well-made basket. And she's the author. I can remember hitting the biggest out the gate during, kind of my generation of writers. And it was a brilliant marketing campaign. I think she had a Stephen King and Anne McCaffrey and a Terry Brooks cover quote on those first 3 books, 1 each, something like that, just something ridiculous. And it was really incredible. So that would have been bad advice for Naomi, whose books are great, by the way. If you guys haven't read Naomi Novik, she is wonderful.
Lightning Tiger 77 says, what are some movies you are looking forward to covering in your YouTube series?
So my YouTube series is only going to cover things very sporadically, but I am working on Jurassic World. Basically, any movie that is a good movie, that's a totally, like, I'm not looking for the terrible movies to trash, and I'm not looking for the really good movies to praise. Actual movie reviewers do good jobs with that, and actual, people who do video essays can tell you things like that. What I'm looking for is the good movie that could be made better by me workshopping it, at least better in my opinion. And so I'm looking for things I can give feedback on. So something like Jurassic World is perfect because Jurassic Park is, in my opinion, it's a perfect movie. Now, a lot of people do not like the term. They it's an almost perfect movie. I think it's all right to say a piece of art is perfect because even the little flaws that you might be able to point out are part of that piece of art now. And that's true of, less perfect things too. But for me, I just go and say, you know what, that's a perfect movie. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change even the little pops and scratches that make it, that might make it, at some point, that might annoy people. It's just an excellent film. And Jurassic World had some big shoes to fill, and it's basically making a good movie, but without Spielberg, who's one of the greatest filmmakers who's ever lived. And so I have things to say, right? I'm like, hey, if I would have gotten this script, here's what I would have said. And so that's what I'm looking forward to. I don't know, I can't decide with new movies which ones are going to fall into that sweet spot for me, where I feel like there's something legitimate I could say that would improve the movie. Like, people were all like, do the Star Wars prequels. And I'm like, this is not, that is not the scope of what this YouTube series is trying to do. Like, the Star Wars prequels, a lot of the problems in them are in the actual filmmaking, which I don't know anything about. Other people can talk about that. And the scripts are just so far removed from what I would have done in the same situation. There is very little feedback I can give that would constructively have helped George make the types of films that he wanted to make. So it's a bad one for me to offer criticism on.
If you want those kinds of reviews, go watch Red Letter Media.
Yes, though content warning.
Yeah, content warning.
Content warning. I would say Lindsay Ellis. Lindsay Ellis or Folding Ideas or Patrick H. Willems. There are a lot of really great video essayists who do excellent work breaking down what works in a film and what doesn't. And often, praising things about the filmmaking that is really interesting. Patrick H. Willems is really good at this. Praising stuff about the filmmaking that I just don't know because I work in a different medium. So, go look at filmmakers who do video essays for that sort of thing, or movie reviewers who can talk about things.
Red Letter's not a film essayist, really.
They are on some of theirs, but yeah, only their Star Wars essays.
Yeah, their Plinkett reviews is really what it comes down to.
There's a guy, Movie Bob, does something called, what's the name of the series? Really That Good, where he just talks about why a film deserves its reputation. And that's a really great series too, because there aren't enough things talking about why things are great in a really critical sense. YouTube, and I understand this, like, it's really fun to watch people tear bad media apart. It is a whole lot of fun. But there is so much to learn from looking at what someone did well. Every frame of painting was so amazing for this. Great channel that it unfortunately is no longer updating, but yeah, go look at some of those.
Alan says, you said that The Way of Kings Prime was the book you wanted to write for yourself to prove that you could do it. Mm-hmm. How were you able to then realize, quote unquote, it wasn't good enough and do a total overhaul, making it better without it being totally soul crushing?
Yeah. This is partially what I gained by spending all of those years writing lots of different things. Is there, like, the earlier books had not been the book of my heart, right? Except Mistborn Prime and Final Empire Prime. That's the part of my career where I tried to write to market, and those are books 11 and 12 in my publication career, I believe. It's possible that Aether and Night is between them or something. But that's where those are the two books that I specifically was like, I'm going to try writing to the market. Dragonsteel was also very much a book of my heart, right? It's where Bridge 4 started. That ended up in Way of Kings. I basically combined my two favorite books and made The Way of Kings that you guys ended up reading, because Dalinar started on Yolin, the planet Yolin, which is where Dragonsteel takes place. And then jumped to Way of Kings Prime when I wrote it, and then stayed in regular Way of Kings. But basically, I had been writing for long enough time that I am was able to get a perspective on my own work, and that was really handy. That's just very, very useful as a writer. So how did I recognize it? I was able, by that point in my career, to recognize things that I had accomplished that I really, really was proud of, but also things that needed more time before I was ready to do them. And the thing I needed more time was learning how to juggle a large cast of characters and learning how to write in one world, right? Like Way of Kings, I didn't know how to write a sequel, and that is a series that needed a sequel in a very different way from White Sand or Elantris or even Dragonsteel, and I knew I just couldn't go forward with that series. It was too off of where I wanted to be. Where the first book was fine, like I think we could have released that, but I would have been in way bigger trouble in the second book because the flaws would have magnified. And I was okay saying, you know what, I can give this some time. And when I said I could give it some time, I was not intending to do the complete overhaul that I did. I was just telling myself, I'll figure it out and I'll revise this. And then I did Mistborn, and the trilogy taught me enough that I'm like, ooh, maybe I can't revise this. And then I did Wheel of Time, and it taught me enough to say, no, I know what I need to do with this now. So I was just, in many ways, very lucky that I had spent all those years not being published and learning some of these skills that became very, very useful to me in my career as I progressed. Kara, what are we signing now? Are these Tor tip-in pages for Rhythm of War?
Yes.
Yep.
We're almost done.
Almost done. So these are going to be in all different bookstores, probably. Anyone can get them.
Yes.
So there's no telling. And this will be bound right into the front. So it's kind of odd. These will be separate from the signed editions we will do for the launch party, which we're still figuring out exactly how we're going to do it. But we're most likely going to be working with a group of bookstores, not just Weller Bookworks and BYU Bookstore. We are going to be working with a large number of bookstores around the country, and then we'll do a big launch event that if you bought the book at any of these places, you get to attend the digital release party, and also you get a signed actual book that's been shipped to me and then shipped to the bookstore to give to you. That's probably what we're going to do, but we're not 100% sure yet. Poor Kara and her team, who were planning a huge, big party bash of a release party with thousands of people, now have to pivot 180 degrees and figure out how to do a digital release party where we can get signed books sent out around the country to everyone.
And swag bags.
And swag bags, yes. Yes. Are actual swag bags?
Yes.
Really? I thought it was just going to be something we slide into each book.
That's the tour, and then the part of the party is some swag bags that will go out before, so that on the day they can all wear their shirts.
Oh, wow.
And take pictures like they're at the event.
Wow, okay.
It's going to be fun.
That's going to be crazy. You are going to ship shirts around the whole country in chosen sizes? Yeah.
We're working out.
Okay.
We're ambitious.
Yes, we are ambitious. We need to talk to the UK and see if they want to offer any of their bookstores in on this or not or something.
Yeah.
Because I always feel bad for people overseas. We should talk to Spain as who we should talk to, because they're the only translation doing a simultaneous release, and they've worked very hard to do that.
Oh, we like the Spain people.
And I wonder if we could just go to them and say, hey, you can give this number out to people who buy a Gigamesh or something. I don't know. Tor's putting a lot of money into making this happen, so I can't promise that we'll be able to let foreign publishers in it, but it would be really cool to let Spain in on it, because they've gone above and beyond the Call of Duty to try to get this book out simultaneous in Spanish.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, remember, see if we need to ask Tor first, because we don't want to step on their toes, because they're investing a ton into making this happen.
So the swag bag part will be independent of
Tor, so we can maybe
that
get.
part
We can offer to. Yeah, I wonder if they can print those in
give
Spain.
them
Give them the file, and maybe they can print them.
Kara, I also doubt they can hear you as well. So.
They can't hear Kara. They can't hear Kara. Haha.
Well, probably not.
Probably
I
not.
mean, it'd be a whisper.
We actually need a microphone back there.
We can do that.
We really should just have that area mic'd up, so when people call things out.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah, because people actually mentioned loving hearing the peanut gallery laughing in the background.
Okay.
It makes it feel less like I'm sitting in a white room talking. It's just like, a little bit like having a studio audience. You are our studio audience. So having them mic'd up.
Apparently they could hear her.
Okay.
So,
Good. Well, I'm really loud too, so.
Yes. Kara and I share an attribute in that you rarely have trouble hearing us. That's not the problem.
No.
So, what time are we at?
we are at 7:50.
Oh, cool.
Chad says, would Adolin or Dalinar have a heron-marked blade if they were in Randland?
Oh, yeah. Adolin would, Dalinar would not.
Oh, interesting.
Dalinar is not a duelist.
Just destroyer.
Dalinar is a destroyer, yes. Dalinar is someone you let loose on a battlefield and couldn't. He does not care if he has a heron mark blade, if he's considered a sword master. He will use any weapon he can get his hands on, and is proficient a lot of them. And what he's most proficient at is striking terror into your heart and laying waste. This is young Dalinar, to everything in his path. Dalinar is a general and a warlord, not a swordsman.
The follow-up question is, how would Adolin fare against the greats like Lan, Rand, Galad? And how would Kaladin and a spear fare against Matt?
So it's really hard to say this, because what are different characters' skill levels and things? For instance, I generally count Lan as the strongest and the best, and my books that I wrote show that. I think Lan would beat Adolin. You just can't. At least this is what I want to believe. Maybe it's not true, but you can't replace the 20 years of intense practice that Lan has, and the wisdom and things. No matter how talented of a rookie you are, even though Adolin's not a rookie, I think that Lan could, go toe to toe with anyone non-immortal in the Cosmere, because a lot of the Cosmere people have an advantage, right? Like Taln has spent 4,000 years practicing with weapons. Granted, he spent a bunch of that time being tortured as well, but he has many lifetimes behind him, and has been able to be killed making mistakes and never make those mistakes again. That is a leg up on someone like Lan or like Adolin that is just of a supernatural level. And so, while I think Lan would beat any swordsman in a fair fight from the Cosmere, I would count anyone who has a greatly expanded lifespan as an unfair fight. Like, I don't think Lan would be able to stand against the better duelists among the heralds, or even against Vasher, right? Like, Vasher's got multiple lifetimes of practicing with a sword, and so. How would Kaladin do against Matt? It depends. Like, Matt's luck is a very big wild card, right? And how is the luck on Matt's side, and how is karma working in Matt's favor or against him in that given moment? That's part of what makes Matt fun. And so Kaladin is a soldier, also, again, not a duelist, right? Kaladin's really good with a spear, but his training is in war. His training is to be a battlefield captain. Rather than, and what even is Matt? Matt is been trained by fate itself with weapons, which is just really hard to play. But so that I would let's call that a tie. Edge probably to Kaladin, right? In that one, Lan beats Adolin, or basically any duelist. But you put him up against the heralds and he has a much harder time.
Matthew says, has knowing that Tor releases the first big chunk of your books when they're coming out changed the way you write? For example, more cliffhangers, things like that.
Nope, it hasn't. Good question. But I am the one who picks what Tor releases. They would not be releasing nearly as much if it weren't my choice, if I hadn't suggested it and strongly encouraged it. It doesn't change how I write the chapters. So that's not really a factor in it for me. I am having a lot of fun, writing a little annotation for every time Tor does a release. On Tuesdays, I go on Reddit on the thread and write a little annotation about the chapter, or chapters. Early ones were multiples. So, yeah, you can go read those. I'm not very good at promoting those. Maybe Adam should tweet about those.
I will keep an eye out for them. Yeah. Sometimes I forget that you do those.
Yeah.
Because that one's all you.
Mm-hmm.
When I write, I have a bad habit of skipping ahead and writing the interesting scenes first, and then have no interest to flesh out the important bits that are in between.
Yeah.
I've tried discovery writing, but it doesn't work for me. Or do you have any other ideas or suggestions to help them out?
Yeah. So first point is, there are writers who do that professionally, and write the exciting bits and then fill them in. If you're consistently unable to get yourself interested, then I don't let myself do that. I think that would be dangerous for me, partially because I don't know exactly who the characters would become by that time, because I discover my characters, but also for the reason you're saying. There's an adage that I adapted from something Peter Ahlstrom once said, where he said, I feel like we should know that every book should have a chance of being somebody's favorite book that you've written, and we should know why that is. Why is this book going to be somebody's favorite book? And I adapt that to chapters. Every chapter, even the boring ones, should have a shot at being somebody's favorite chapter in the book. And I think sitting down ahead of time, if you aren't a discovery writer, what helps me is saying, all right, what are 5 things about this chapter that are just going to make it different, interesting, and maybe somebody's favorite chapter in the book? even though it's going to be a conversation between two characters, what can I do to make that conversation more exciting, more interesting? What can I do to the setting? What thing between the characters can happen? What part of the world could they interact with that we haven't seen before? What is going to make this chapter sing? And try to make it so that, what is that famous quote? It's often attributed to Mark Twain, but I don't know if he said it. Writing is easy, just leave out the boring parts, right? Just skip the parts that no one wants to read. I say that that's pithy, but really what you want to do is make sure every chapter is the exciting chapter for someone. It doesn't have to be, you can't write it so everyone's favorite chapter is every chapter, but you can write it so that every chapter is someone's favorite chapter. Try to do that and ask yourself ahead of time, what's going to make this chapter sing? And you may find yourself doing weird things like having Dalinar be in the middle of a wrestling match when he's supposed to be communicating with some important dignitary via spanreed, which it basically came from this. I'm like, where is Dalinar right now as a person? What's going to make this chapter interesting? What does he want to do? He wants to buck a little bit against what's happening, even though he's the one that set it up. How's he going to do that? How will this actually reveal who he is as a character, and how it will make the scene interesting? It became one of my favorite chapters in the book, and it was going to be a dry conversation via spanreed. So, maybe that'll help. And we are probably out of time, aren't we? And we have
7:56.
Yeah. Oh, let's do one more. Yeah.
Jeffrey wants to know, what is your favorite part about being a writer?
Favorite part about being a writer is telepathy. I get to have something in my brain, and I get to go like this, and lots of typing as well. But what happens is you then get to see that same thing in your brain, despite the fact that you may live in a different country from me and that we will never meet. I have projected this idea into your brain, this image, this scene. Being able to do that, being able to kind of in some way connect with thousands of people, tens of thousands, millions of people, is just what made me become a writer. Was reading books by authors I loved and feeling like I understood the world better, and I understood them even though they were decades apart from me and many, many miles. And that's what I wanted to learn to do. So that's my favorite part. I will say that, I forgot to read fan mail. Maybe we should end on a fan mail. I will say that being able to set my own hours is really handy. I really like that part of being a writer as well. And being kind of in control of my own destiny, right? So anyway, Keelan has sent me something with a bunch of cards in it. It says Raffo on the back. Read and find out. Very nice. So let's see. I hope you enjoy my calligraphy. I do. I took a calligraphy class in college, and it was super hard. And wow, you're doing this. I always had to have the lines. These are really well done. Quite beautiful. They're quotes from my books. This is a good one. Strength does not make one capable of rule. It makes one capable of service, with different coloring on the two letters that are both starting with S. So those are very nice. I love these. If you read this on video, say a favorite quote, and I'll write it and send it to you. Oh. So what is my favorite quote? One that you haven't already done.
Does it have to be from?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be from.
You just had that good one.
Yeah.
A minute ago.
What was that? Oh.
The one that you thought was attributed to.
Yeah, that's true. That is a really good quote. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it is a really good quote. Writing is easy, you just leave out the boring parts. Or there are various variations on it. I've seen it stated like 5 different ways. What is my favorite quote? From my own books, it's probably the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you what to think, but to give you questions to think upon. I'm not sure if I even quoted myself correctly on that, so you'd want to look it up. Which is something I shamelessly stole from an interview adapted that Robert Jordan once gave. I turned it into this concept, but he had the sentiment in what he answered in the interview. Someone should find that. I think it's on one of the CDs, the old CDs. They would put interviews sometimes with Robert Jordan at the end of the audiobooks. Someone should find that. Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but I feel like that's where I got that from. That's probably my favorite of my quotes because I, again, got it from someone very wise. Favorite actual quote? I don't know. Let's go with that one. Let's just go with that one. I would have to give real thought to what my actual favorite quote is, because there are lots of really good ones out there. But I thank you for this. So Pittsburgh, that is awesome. We'll make good use of these. So let's put that there. Let's say thank you to you guys. 2 weeks, we'll be back. Can't promise we'll be at noon next time, but we will eventually do one at noon. Isaac said he'd join us next week to kind of talk about some of the Kickstarter art. We should have all of the Chicken Scout. I saw the Chicken Scout sketches today, and they are hilarious. So hopefully we'll have that done, and maybe things like that. So anyway, thanks guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks.